Good morning. It's good to be here with you. As Greg said, my name is Matt Churchill. I'm the director out at Moine Christian Service Camp, and we're coming up on our fourth summer back at the camp, which seems like yesterday we were just moving there, and here we are a few years later. But today was an interesting morning for me. My wife and a couple of my boys are getting ready to head down to St. Louis area. We do some therapy and some doctors and stuff down there. So just kind of rushing around this morning, and last night my parents came in. My dad's going to help me for about a week out at the camp, do some different things. And so just been kind of hectic the last few days, let alone everything else that's going on in our life. And so last night I went and I plugged in my iPad to get it charged, because I preach from an iPad. It just makes my life a lot easier when I don't have loose papers all the time. And this morning realized I never plugged it into the wall. And so I was like, well, no big deal. I'll just plug it in and charge it on my way here. You know, I have an hour drive, or about an hour drive, and just do that. I get here, I look over, and the cord's just kind of hanging there. The charger, it broke off inside the iPad, and so it didn't charge either. On my way here, as many times I've been to this area, you know, coming hunting with Jim, coming to preach here, area fellowships, I drove like right past one of my turns, and like as I'm driving, I was like, yep, that's where I needed to turn. So, you know, whipped to you, he came around. I'm here, so that's good. But you ever have one of those days where you just feel like you need to start over, right? Right? Like you almost need a reset. King David definitely did. He understood this concept. He understood needing to restart and refresh. He was called a man after God's own heart. And he did something that so many of us could never fathom, that we couldn't even imagine him doing or ourselves doing. You know, he had an affair with the wife of one of his best soldiers, and after finding out that she was pregnant, he had the man killed. After being confronted with that sin in his life and the mistake that he made by a man named Nathan, he then wrote these words. Psalm 51, verse 10, it says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me." He understood that only God could do that, and he needed what only God could do. He needed to refresh, reset, and renew. And it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be painless. There was going to be things along the way that he was going to be struggling with, but he knew that he needed more. He needed something different. And at some point, I believe we all come to that conclusion, that we need something different in our lives. Right before I went off to Bible college, I had taken a couple years off of school and was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. I was working in restaurants, I started doing construction, and nothing just seemed to be quite right. But I also was living for myself, doing whatever I wanted to do. And whatever I seemed to be right in my own eyes. And after being confronted with my own sin, and I started going back to church, things kind of got better for me. But there was one night in our community, all the churches would kind of get together, and they would have these nights of prayer and praise. The different praise teams would get up and they'd lead worship, and I remember being there one Saturday evening at this, and just feeling overwhelmed with the sin in my life, and just feeling like I needed a restart, to be refreshed and renewed in my own life. And so during one of the songs, I don't remember the song, I just got so overwhelmed with just all the consequences of the sin that I had, that I left the sanctuary, walked down the hallway, knelt in one of the Sunday school classrooms, and just began to pray. Just prayed to God that he would renew the steadfast spirit within me. Basically is what I was doing. And I got up from that time. I walked out of that room, and I felt the burden of my sin lifted. Now, the consequences were still there. I still had to deal with the issues that were there, but the guilt and the shame was gone. And I think sometimes we need that. And like many of us, at one point, I was living for myself, my own desires, my own flesh. And my actions were evident of that. Paul writes about this in Galatians 5 when he compares a life controlled by sin with a life controlled by the Spirit. He writes out a list of evidences of a life controlled by sin. That the list includes things like sexual immorality, idolatry, jealousy, strife, hostility, outbursts of anger, selfishness, dissensions, and a lot more. He tells us that he tells us that the work on this. Sorry, my pages are messed up. See, this is why I don't do paper, right? This is it right here. But he tells us that there's a difference in that. I need to grab my phone. I'm sorry. I'm so messed up right now. I've got it on my phone, so I can hopefully read it. He tells us, he compares this and compares this. He says that the people who live that way will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. And then he compares that. He compares that with a life controlled by the Spirit. A life controlled by the Spirit includes things like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And now they're not just character traits. It's rather a showing of a gradual growth in our lives. And what happens is these roots begin to form and take deep within us. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. We don't wake up and boom, we're more joyful or we're more loving, right? It's a gradual thing that happens within us. But to have the fruit of the Spirit exemplified within our lives, we have to work that soil a little bit. There's a pruning also that tends to take place. Now, my dad has apple trees. And he prunes them all the time, and I get the benefit of it because then he brings the wood to me, and I use it on my smoker and things. But it makes the fruit better. It makes the tree more robust in that as well. And that's exactly what happens to ourselves when we choose to follow Jesus. In order to rid ourselves of the sinful desires within us, we have to die to ourselves. That means we choose to follow him. See, Jesus doesn't just want something from us. He wants us. All of us. Every part of us. Even the parts that we don't like about ourselves. He wants us. 2 Corinthians 5:17, Paul writes that we are new creatures, new creations, made from a new quality with a renewed spirit. See, our spirit, which was formerly dead through our sins and our transgressions, is now alive. We have a new life with Christ. This newness of life, this being a new creature, is dependent upon how we respond to God's invitation. Right? As we respond in faith, as we continue to grow in our faith, Gareth Reese writes that as we respond in faith and repentance, God goes about his creative work in our spirit. New things have come. We've changed with new goals, new purposes, new views of God in this world, new views of truth and our duty. See, our whole soul, our whole mind and body and strength and everything that we are is now consecrated to Christ. That is, that we are set apart, wholly devoted to him, and dedicated to Christ through his work in this world. Our focus, our energy, our lives are now dedicated with a new purpose. And this concept is nothing new. God's been doing a new thing, as he calls it, for some time now. See, God is a God who redeems his people, and I'm so thankful for that. He's a God who redeems his people, and there's a common theme throughout not only the Bible, but specifically in the book of Isaiah. While the people of Israel had failed at living up to the standards of God, as we all do, God did not leave them in the mess that they made. He doesn't leave us in the mess that we make. Rather, God works through his people and in his people. And we're going to be in Isaiah chapter 43 here for a second. But what's happening is Isaiah's prophesying about what's going to happen when the people of Israel leave Babylon. Okay, and so in starting in verse 16, excuse me, verse 16, it says, "This is what the Lord says. He who made a way through the seas, a path through the mighty waters, who drew out the chariots and horses, the army and reinforcements together, and they lay there, never to rise again, extinguished, snuffed out like a wick. Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up, do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." He says, stop dwelling on the past. We have to move forward. Does that mean that we discredit what was done before, that what God has done before in our lives? No, not at all. That's not what he's saying. But it does mean that we don't do everything in the same way that we used to. Here, God is reminding the people of the first Exodus, when they left Egypt. Did you catch that in the beginning where he says that he basically parted the waters? He's reminding the people of his faithfulness in the past. You know, he's saying forget the past, but then he brings it up. Why? Well, to remind them of that faithfulness. He doesn't want us to focus on it, but he doesn't want us to live there either. See, rather, he's showing that his past actions provide the foundation for his future work today and well into the future. He does this to show that his nature is unchanging. He moves forward. God wants Israel to forget about the old so they can focus on the new thing that he's about to do in their lives. During that first Exodus, God parted the sea and he made the ground dry for them to walk on. This time, he will add streams to the wilderness. See, God always provides what is needed. Whether we realize it or not, or whether we agree with it or not, he provides what is needed. See, the people needed redemption from Babylon, an exodus, and a return to the promised land. They needed different things than they would have needed in the past. Likewise, you and I need different things than the past. Sometimes we need God to make a path through the sea so we can walk on dry grounds. Other times, we need sustenance in the wilderness. Regardless, he provides for what is needed at the time, not necessarily for what we think we need. Now, I have 4 children, ranging from 14 to 2. And what my 14-year-old needs is not the same thing that my 2-year-old needs, even if he thinks he needs what she gets, right? The same thing is true, you know, if I let them, they would have candy all the time. My 2-year-old, he's like, I need that. It's like, well, no, bud, you need an apple, right? We're saying the same way in our lives. Sometimes we think we need something or we think we want something, and yet God provides something different. See, we don't think like God thinks. We don't act like him, and that's a good thing. You guys don't want me and the way I think to be God, right? We don't want that position. See, if we stay focused on the past, though, we are crippled into the future and we become stagnant in the present. Our imagination is limited when God's ability to act has no limit. Paul tells us in Ephesians 3:20 that God could do far more than we could ever think or imagine. God does this, Paul says, according to the power that works within us. The Spirit that is alive in us is how God does far more than we could ever think or imagine. Now, this is true for individuals. This is true for churches. This is true for camps. In 1947, there was a man visiting Camp Point, Illinois, named Melvin Fiscus, who was considering going to First Christian Church to be the preacher there. And he was taking a tour of the town, and he came across a park called Bailey Park. And he said, wouldn't this be an ideal place to start a camp for young people? And 2 years later, in 1947, that's exactly what he did. About 10 years later, the churches got together and said, this is not a good permanent location for a camp. If we want to continue to do this, we need to find a permanent location. So in 1956, they purchased the 20 acres where Moine Christian Service Camp now sits. And in 1957, they began to build. They built that first summer, they built the old dining hall. The next year, they built the original chapel. And we don't do camp in the same way that we used to do camp. right? In 1947, they stayed in tents and they walked to a church for meals. Today it's pretty nice, right? They've got air conditioning, they've got heat, they've got their showers like in the building. They don't have open air showers anymore. My father-in-law used to tell me about how when he was a camper, they'd catch frogs and they'd throw them into the girls' showers because it was an open air shower, right? And he was a nice guy. But we don't do camp in the same way. Does that mean that what was done in the 40s and 50s was bad? No, not at all. It just means that for today's kids, it wouldn't work. Could you imagine? What was done in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even up to today does not work for each generation. And that is why we continue to move forward as a camp. Just as God was building on the past for Israel, we too are building on the foundation of what had been laid before us. Like I said, in 1957, the original dining hall was built. In 58, became the chapel. Several years later came cabins and a pool and a multi-purpose building and renovation of those cabins. See, everything was done, though, for a purpose. And while the time has come for us to kind of move forward in order to have camp well into the future, in order to continue to minister well to the children that come to camp, we don't want to be crippled by the past. We want to celebrate the history of the camp, and we want to build off of it so we can continue well into the future. When we stop dreaming and we look back at what we have done, we begin to focus on ourselves and not where God is leading us. And so this past fall, we kicked off what we call the Legacy Campaign. See, we want to use the resources that are available to us as a camp in order to continue to do ministry well into the future. And this means that we're going to do some things that are exciting, and some things that I found out even just this past week are not so exciting for some people. And that's okay. But we're going to continue to move forward. And we broke this campaign up into 2 phases. Phase 1 includes things like new siding and windows and decks on the camp residence where I live. The siding's in really poor shape. The decks are really beginning to show their wear and need a lot of repair. And the windows are just old and really drafty. And so in order to save the camp money and to continue to provide housing for the director and whoever comes in after us, we need to make some upgrades to that, so that way we can utilize our resources well into the future as well. Not only that, but this past week we started doing some work on our small multi-purpose building, as we call it. We're going to change the name. I just think that's a mouthful. I don't know yet. Well, maybe we'll submit like a survey and let people choose it. I don't know, but it's a small multi-purpose building that sleeps some people and has a meeting room. We started painting the exterior. This fall, we're going to do some renovations on the interior of it as well, making it more accessible for our handicapped guests and campers as well. The third thing on the list is with the original chapel. Now, we don't do chapel there anymore. We have the new multi-purpose building that was put up in 2003. And so we moved chapel into that, but we still utilize the building. We store some machinery and different things in there, and so we want to take care of that building. And it needs a new roof, and so we'll be adding working on that as well. We're accepting bids at this time, so we haven't started that work yet. And the last thing for phase 1 was actually done just a couple weeks ago, involves the old dining hall. It was no longer usable for us, and it was just kind of there, just sitting empty. And so, well, it wasn't empty, but it was just kind of there, storing a lot of things that we didn't need. And so we actually tore that building down. The building was built in 1957. It was used for 46 years before the retreat center was finished in 2003. And so we tore that down, and we know that it holds many memories for a lot of people. However, it was going to take too much to make it usable once again. And so instead, we removed the building, and now we're going to be putting up a new playground for the campers. In that location, the playground's going to have 2 ADA transfer stations on it, allowing kids of all abilities to be able to utilize our equipment, making it safer and more accessible for all people. And so that's kind of phase 1 with that. Phase 2 is a little more extensive. Greg mentioned the pool, and I have a very strong love but more hate relationship with the pool. Last summer, I half jokingly like to say I almost resigned over the pool. It just gave me so much trouble. But I will say we've been blessed that we have a pool. We no longer have to bus kids to town to swim. And so we want to take care of the pool. And it needs some major repairs done at the pool. We need new filters and pumps and chemical feeder and just different things with that. And there's a lot of strict guidelines for that as we're finding out through the state and federal government. We can't change the drain covers in our pool anymore ourselves. We have to hire an architect or an engineer to approve that. And it's all safety regulations, and I understand that. It's frustrating, but it comes from a good place. So we know that we're going to have to hire a contractor, an engineer in 4 years to change the drain covers. So we're in just one swoop, we're going to take care of all of it and hire that person one time to change out the filters and all that stuff, because we cannot do the work ourselves. And so we want that pool to be taken care of for many, many years. We want it around. We don't want to have to get a new one. I talked to other camps who are trying to raise money right now for pools, and we're talking like millions of dollars. And so we don't want to have to do that. So we want to take care of what we have. The last thing, part of phase 2, exciting for me personally, is that we want to build a new chapel. Called the Bailey Worship Center, named after the park where the camp first got its start. We believe this new worship center will allow us to do ministry better. Instead of distracting campers as they're gathering for worship and we're trying to either set up or clean up from a meal or move on to the next thing, so that way everything can just kind of run seamlessly, we want to give them a dedicated worship space. A place where when they walk into this building, they know what they're doing. There, that they can focus on the reason that they came to camp, to grow in their faith, free of the distractions of all the other things that are going on. And not only that, but this, we believe, will allow us to do more programming during our, what we call the off season. We've started to add some programs, some junior high, preteen event this year. We want to actually have 10 to 12 off-season programs that we are running so we can better partner with churches just like this one in our area to help facilitate the faith growth of all people, for kids and adults. Because the mission of the camp is to create a Christian camping environment that challenges youth and adults to love and serve Christ. And everything we do, all the building projects, all the programs we run, everything we do is with that goal in mind. And so while we may be tearing down an old building, the legacy does not change. The history and the foundation does not change. The future is where we're headed. And our goal for this is to raise $1 million over the next 5 years, which is a lot of money. We have over 11% on hand. And so we started some of those projects in phase 1 already. But like I said, all these projects are intended to help us to continue to do ministry and to complete our mission of creating an environment that challenges youth and adults to love and serve Christ. And as a camp, we continue to move forward, working with young people throughout our region so that they may grow in their faith. And we see and we hear countless stories of campers attending Moine whose lives have been completely transformed after spending time out there each year. We've had former campers go on to lead ministries that reach around the world, to lead in Bible colleges, serve in the local church, and so many more. And some of you have experienced that. And when you stop and think about the small investment of a session of camp and the eternal reward that comes as a result of it, the investment is well worth it. I'll tell you, I'm a product of camp. I wouldn't be a Christian today if a friend didn't invite me in junior high to go to camp. I don't think my parents would be Christians today if a friend, when I was in junior high, didn't invite me to camp. See, it can change the legacy of a whole family. And we've seen that on more than one occasion. One of our board members, her parents are now serving in the local church after she became a Christian, after spending time out at camp. A couple weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago, I was at our church in Burnside where we attend regularly, and the preacher got up. His name's Mark, got up and called one of the high school students up with him. His name's Parker, and he talked about how Parker came to him after high school camp last summer and said, "Mark, I want to write a sermon." And so Mark was working with Parker all year to write this sermon, and he took this sermon to there's like a preacher boy contest in Missouri that they went to, and he preached that sermon for the first time, and he's going to be preaching it at our church. I just hope it's a Sunday that I'm there. But he said that after spending time at camp and being challenged and being able to focus in, he felt that God was calling him to do that, to leading him to do that. And the messages and the environment allowed Parker to hear that calling on his life. And we don't know where it's going to lead him, ultimately. But we know who is leading him. And we hear stories just like that all year. Last summer, we had a boy come to camp. And his dad was incarcerated, and so he's in the foster system. And we have a program out at the camp where we partner with an organization that helps send campers to camp whose parents are incarcerated. They'll pay 100% or 50%, kind of depending on some circumstances with that. And this family heard about this, and so they called me up on a Saturday evening. I happened to be in the office. I'm not usually there. I happened to be there. They called me up and said, "Hey, is it too late for this boy to go to the boys' camp that starts tomorrow?" I said, "No, it's not too late. We got plenty of space." And so we got talking, and I got to hear a story a little bit. And so I was like, "Bring him." The organization would cover 50%, and they're like, "Well, we can't cover the rest." I'm like, "Well, that's okay. We don't turn any camper away, regardless of whether or not they can afford camp." It's a policy the board started a long time ago, and we believe that camp is so important that we will figure out a way to get kids to camp. And so this family called me up. We did that. The boy showed up the next day, and let me tell you, he did not want to be there. And we get kids like this all summer long. There's like, I don't really want to be here. Most of the kids are excited to be at camp. But this boy didn't want to be there. And the reason he didn't want to be there was because he thought he was in trouble. See, he'd been bounced around from foster home to foster home. And when things got rough, they moved him on to a new place. And so he thought that this family was sending him away for some time just to get him away from him, which wasn't the case. They wanted better for him. And so he was there, and the first day or so, you could tell he didn't want to be there. He told you that, but you could tell just by his actions as well. But I remember walking through our gym area. I had to go deal with something in the kitchen, and walking through there, and one of our local preachers was there preaching about the prodigal son and about this father, right, who runs out to greet his son and to bring him into the fold and to restores him back to his previous position within the family. And probably for one of the first times in this boy's life, he heard about this message of Jesus. But God, who sacrificed himself so we could have a relationship with him. And the boy at the end of the session of camp was not the same boy at the beginning of the camp. I got to see him about a month or two later. We had an event out at the camp. There was an organization having an event out at the camp for foster families, and he was there. And the boy that I saw, after spending a few months with this Christian family, after spending time out at Moine, was not the same kid that first arrived. And we hear stories and we see stories of life change happening at the camp every year. Each summer, Moine collects camper fees, and those fees cover about 50% of the actual cost to send a kid out to camp. The other 50% is covered through the generosity of our churches and donors, just like you and just like this one. And so we cannot thank you guys enough for supporting the camp. The fellowship meeting that you host, the giving up of your time to serve in the kitchen, to help with our church projects, all of those things help us keep the cost of camp low, as well as covering that other 50%. And so in an effort to continue to keep the cost of camp low, as the prices around us continue to go up, we are always looking for new ways to partner with individuals that are willing to invest in the lives of young people. And so this year, we started what I'm calling Moine 365. For $1 a day, $365 a year, you could help us cover the other 50% to send a kid, or up to 3 kids, to camp, depending on which session they go to. Campers just like Parker, campers just like that other boy who came out, whose lives can be impacted in a positive way. For $365 a year, $1 a day, you can easily invest in the lives of those who attend Moine each and every summer. And the goal of Moine isn't just to simply have campers show up to camp. If that's all it was, I wouldn't be there. The goal of Moine is to have campers show up who come to know Jesus, who grow in their faith, and belong to Him. And you know, we belong to Jesus when we are crucified, when we crucify our sinful desires. And this isn't just a one-time decision, right? I mean, many of you know this. We have to wake up daily and make that decision sometimes. But it's a continual effort on our part. Romans 6:4, Paul tells us that we are buried with Christ through baptism so that we can have a new life. That means a new quality of life. What we have now isn't what it always has to be. When we come to know Christ, we live differently from the old. We are no longer dominated by the power of sin, and we have been set free from sin. One author and theologian, F.F. Bruce, puts it this way: we have a new mode of life. When Paul writes this, he's saying that Christians are capable of living differently than they were before. We have a newness of life. Likewise, just a few verses later, Romans 6:14, Paul writes that sin is no longer a master over us. Sin tempts us, harasses us, it ensnares us. It's powerful, dangerous, and far too often victorious in our lives. However, through Christ, that same sin no longer has authority over us if we use our lives as instruments of righteousness instead. See, when we were fallen, that is before we conformed our lives to Christ, sin reigned over us. We did not live for ourselves, but rather for the sin that controlled us, that lived within us, from the evil within. But now we are set free from that, and instead we serve Christ. And that is the prayer of David in Psalm 51, verse 10, when he prays to God, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me." Paul speaks of this same concept in Romans 12:2 when he says, "Do not be conformed to this world any longer, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." We need a new spirit. We need a new mindset. See, our whole conduct is to be different from that of the world because our thinking is to be different from that of the world. We're to be transformed into the likeness of God. And Paul is talking about changing in the way we view the world, not just an adjustment of our attitude. He warns us to not let the world squeeze us into its mold. There's a couple of statements that kind of go along with that just drive me nuts. A couple of things. And I'll be honest, I've been guilty of using them in the past, and every once in a while I'll use one of them. But these statements, the first one is, "That's just who I am." You ever say that? You ever hear people say that? Oftentimes it's a statement that we use when talking about a character flaw. Like, "Sorry, that's just who I am," right? January 31st, 1919, Jackie Roosevelt Robinson was born in Georgia. His mother was deeply religious, and she raised her children to serve God. Growing up without a father, they moved to California when he was young. Jackie did not have an easy upbringing. From the time of his youth, Robinson faced racism and injustices, whether that be from classmates, police officers, or even during his time as an officer in the military. Jackie was not one to kind of just take it in stride, but rather he would often respond with anger and fury. And while playing baseball in the Negro National League, Jackie met a man named Branch Rickey, a deeply religious man himself, who saw that the Jim Crow laws of the area that didn't allow black players to play Major League Baseball as being unjust. And in that meeting, Rickey told Jackie that in order to integrate baseball, it was going to be about more than playing great ball. If Jackie Robinson was going to be the first Major League Baseball's first black baseball player, he would have to endure a tremendous amount of abuse, both verbal and physical. Robinson was no stranger to enduring that. In fact, he would often respond with his fists and felt like he could take whatever was thrown at him. However, Rickey said, and I quote, that he was looking for a player with guts enough not to fight back. Robinson had to endure all sorts of abuse, verbal from fans and players alike, physical from other players, unjust treatment at hotels and restaurants, far more than we could probably even imagine. And yet he did it without fighting back. See, Jackie couldn't just be who he was. He had to be different. When he was young, he met a Methodist preacher named Carl Downs who helped Jackie Robinson understand that exploding in anger was not a Christian response to injustice, but neither was being submissive. Downs helped Robinson see that his bad temper and fierce anger needed to be brought under control. And the same is true for our character flaws. Just because we are a certain way doesn't mean that it's the right way or that it can't be changed. The moment we stop growing, we stifle the Spirit's work in our own lives, jeopardizing what God longs to do in us and through us. The other phrase that has grown more in popularity here recently, and it just drives me nuts. My former office manager, her name's Lorraine, she used to say this all the time, and I would be like, Lorraine, stop it. Because it just, I don't know what it is about it, but it's this phrase, it is what it is. You ever hear that? You ever use that? Right? The reason I don't like it is because it's a defeatist mindset. It gets us nowhere. Oftentimes we use it in a way where we throw up our hands and just kind of, in order to halfway accept the terms of whatever's going around us, it is what it is. What can you do about it? That's just how it goes. There's a man named Dietrich Bonhoeffer who was born in Germany 8 years before the start of World War I. Growing up to become a Lutheran minister during the rise of Hitler, Bonhoeffer saw that it was the duty of Christians to speak out for those who could not. See, to Bonhoeffer, singing praises to God on Sunday and doing whatever we wanted the rest of the week and not doing what God had called us to do is what he would describe as a hypocrite. See, Bonhoeffer would go on to lead illegal seminaries. He taught and spoke publicly, even when the Nazis told him not to. Bonhoeffer decided at one point that for his own safety, he was going to leave Germany and move to the United States. But upon boarding the ship, he decided that God wanted more from him, and once he reached New York, he quickly got on a ship and returned back to Germany. Not only that, but Bonhoeffer quickly joined other conspirators to help bring down the Nazis. And after being arrested in 1942, Bonhoeffer was found out to not only be a pastor and academic who had theological difficulties with the Nazi regime, but he was also a leader in a conspiracy to kill Hitler. April 9th, 1945, Bonhoeffer was executed by hanging because he wasn't willing to go along with the injustices with the mindset of, it is what it is. From an earlier trip to New York, Bonhoeffer lived a life that was not just having a genuine relationship with Jesus, but also a life that was translated into action. Likewise, our devotion to Christ should compel us to action. Not because we're earning grace, but because we're standing with Him. See, God doesn't simply want something from us. He wants us. And when we realize that, when we come to an understanding that there is nothing that we can do to earn God's grace, nothing we can do to earn His love and His mercy in our lives, we get beyond this transactional relationship with God and move into His presence and experience Him in a way that we have never done before. And at the end of the road, at the end of Paul's life, he pens these words in Philippians 3, verse 13 and 14. He says, "Brothers and sisters, I do not regard myself as having taken hold of it yet, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus." Paul writes that though he has not held that prize yet, his ultimate goal is to do so. See, we cannot sit at ease just waiting. When we were converted to Christ, we were not done. It's not a one-time decision. We must continue to strive forward in our faith. See, Paul had a singular focus in his life. Nothing was going to divert him away from his goal of being in paradise with Jesus. He let everything else go, all the past that he used to boast about, all the mistakes that he made, and even the ministry that he had. And as Paul writes this, he's picturing a runner reaching and straining forward in the home stretch of the race, seeing the finish line not far off, drawing on every last bit of energy and strength that he might have, exhausting himself, using every last bit of energy he can to reach the finish line, to reach the goal. When I was in high school, I joined the wrestling team. My freshman year, I wrestled in a weight class that there was a senior in. And so I didn't get a whole lot of wrestling matches, at least not at the varsity level. And I remember being at one tournament, and the coach got really mad at the senior that was in my weight class. I'm not sure what happened, but he said, "If you're just going to go out there and lose, I'm going to put Matt in." I was like, "Thanks for the confidence, coach," right? Like, no big deal. It got me some more matches, so I didn't really care. But I remember being in that first match out there, and as I was wrestling, we end regulation with a tie. And in wrestling, overtime is sudden death. The first person to score a point wins. And you're in the neutral position, and it's a minute long, and so you've already wrestled for 6 minutes, which doesn't seem like a very long amount of time. But when you do it, it takes more effort than you realize. But after that, there's a minute of overtime, and after that minute of overtime, we were still tied. No one had scored. And so we went into double overtime. And the rules have changed from when I was a kid to today a little bit, but what it was back then, you had 30 seconds of wrestling. And you're in what's called the referee's position. One guy's on bottom, one guy's on top. And you have 30 seconds, sudden death again, you score, you win. If the guy on top holds the other guy down and doesn't let him out, then he wins. And so it's 30 seconds long. And I remember going over to the corner where my coaches were. The ref was up at the head table kind of dealing with something. And I remember going over there and just being exhausted. Like, I was done. And I'm standing there, my hands on my knees. You're just like, oh man, you're winded and stuff. And my coach is explaining to me what's happening. And because I didn't know. It was my first year of wrestling. I'd never seen this. And so he's telling me what's going on. And I remember saying this phrase, "I can't do that. 30 more seconds." Well, we had this saying on our wrestling team because one of my coaches was a Marine, and he used to tell us all the time, "Can't means won't." And I use that phrase with my kids all the time. Whenever they tell me they can't do something, I'm like, "Can't means won't. You need to go do this," right? And I'd heard that phrase all year long. And I remember standing there exhausted, just being like, "I can't do that." And this coach was sitting down, and he stands up and kicks the chair out from under him, and it seemed like it flew across the gym. I doubt it went that far, but that's what I remember in my head. And I looked over at him, and he just yells at me, "Can't means won't. Get out there and win." Like, okay. Like, what do you say to that, right? Like, you got this big guy yelling at you, and so I go out there, and I'm on top, and all I can think about is, I better not let this guy go. Like, I got 30 seconds. I better not let him go. And so we're there and we're wrestling. And I remember just being in that moment, using every last bit of energy I had, every last bit of strength that I had left in me that I could muster up to hold this onto this guy and to keep him from escaping and just going for 30 seconds, which seemed like an eternity. At the end of the match, they blow the whistle. We go to the center. We shake hands. And he raises my hand. I was able to do it because I didn't want to go back to my coach, right? I didn't want to go over there and be like, I couldn't get it done. And let me tell you, here I am, 40 years old, and I still remember that. And I remember the feeling of that accomplishment. But that feeling is nothing in comparison. When we are in eternity, and God looks at us and he says, well done, good and faithful servant. We need to use every last bit of energy that we have to reach the goal of being with him. We're not there yet. We've not reached home yet. My great-grandma lived to be almost 101 years old, and she was a feisty lady. I may have shared about her in the past, I don't know. But I remember being at her funeral service and the preacher sharing a story about her. In her house, there was a picture of her in front of a race car with a checkered flag. And he had asked her one time, well, tell me about this. And she goes, oh, it's really easy to win a race when you drive everybody else off the road. That's the type of woman that she was. And she lived by herself till she was 94. And the only reason it was until she was 94 is because one of her children decided, I'm going to move in with you, Mom, because you shouldn't be by yourself anymore. And she refused to leave home so she moved in with her. And I remember being with her kind of, the later years of her life. And she just used to say, I just want to go home. She didn't mean to her house, right? She wanted to go be with Jesus. But even in those moments, she knew that she had a ministry and a job to do. You would walk through her house and you would just see lists of names taped to her wall. And as she would walk by those names, she would stop and she would just pray over that list. See, it doesn't matter where we are in our life. It doesn't matter where we are, what the circumstances are around us. We have a ministry to do. We're not home yet. We will be someday, but we need to fix our attention on what is to come. See, God doesn't just want something from us. He wants all of us. And maybe today you've not placed your faith in him. Maybe today you haven't crucified your sinful desires and been baptized into him. Today is a great day to do that. Maybe today you're here and you're just like, you know what? I need a reset. I need that refreshment, that renewal that only God can offer. Man, today's a great day for that. I know Bruce would love to talk with you, or any one of your elders, or myself. We'd love to pray with you. Regardless of where you are in your faith, if you have a decision to be made, I'm sure we're going to have a song here in just a moment. Take the time. Don't leave this place without making that right, without having a conversation. Will you pray with me? Almighty God, we thank you so much for this day that we could gather in your house and worship you together. Thank you so much for just your mercy and your grace in our life that did not leave us in our sin, in the mess that we made, but rather you came so we could have a life with you. And Father, as we need renewal in our lives and as we need to reset from time to time, Father, we thank you for the mercy of that as well. Just give us the strength and the courage to admit when we're wrong, to make those decisions that will bring us closer to you, because we're not home yet. Thank you for all that you do in our lives and through our lives. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Let's stand and sing.